Hello, welcome to another edition of Curtis Jones Writing. Uh, I'm in my sixth book, which is the third book in the trilogy of Love Endures All Things, and I'm on chapter 6. I guess I ought to apologize for not being able to post as often, but I'm in the middle of a building project, so it takes some of my time. Uh, but I'll try to get all of them done as to keep up with my reading and presenting these chapters. The chapter 6, if you remember, begins after we left uh, Decatur, Arkansas. I think it was, yes, Decatur, Arkansas, where Stephanie worked. We'd gone on vacation, come back from vacation, and she was fired when we got back. But anyway, you'll have to listen to that chapter to get all the details. So this chapter is entitled Bienville, Louisiana. That's where Stephanie was hired when we left uh, Decatur, Arkansas. So let me pick up on the beginning of chapter 6. After being hired in Louisiana, Stephanie got busy looking for a house to rent before we got there. We found a very nice house in a small town called Bienville, just about 10 miles south of Arcadia, where the plant was located. We agreed to rent it after we got a good look around the place. It had a two-car garage, a den with a fireplace, a separate washroom off of the den. The house was quite large with 3 bedrooms, a formal dining room, 3 bathrooms, and a breakfast nook. The house also had an attic. The house was everything we could have asked for, and it was the same price we paid for the average house that we had in Decatur, Arkansas. We drove to Arcadia to meet the landlords and then to see the house. We liked it right away. We spoke at length with the owners, and they were nice folks. We rented the place and we told them we wanted the rent to start on the next first of the month so we could make the rent payment without difficulty and make it on time. That gave us 4 weeks before we would move in. During this time, we sold the house in Nycut to a fellow and his wife that had asked about it. We then sold the mobile home to a company in Evansville, Arkansas. Uh, they Arkansas. They bought it and moved it out. We had to take the front porch off and remove the back porch room before we would, before they would move the trailer. The man that bought the place didn't want the mobile home left there. It was a lot of work, but we got it done within about 2 weeks. This gave us time to prepare for the move to Louisiana. Stephanie's mom brought her living room and bedroom furniture with us in the moving truck that we rented. We took the RV down before we moved and placed it on the at the house we rented. Gina, Stephanie's mom, stayed with us until she was able to get a place in Louisiana. Gina got a place in the senior citizen housing development within 2 weeks. An older person had died, and Gina was first on the list to receive the apartment. Stephanie's mother is English, and she has that dry English sense of humor. A neighbor was watching Gina as she planted flower seeds in her little garden spot. As she planted seeds, she would spit on the seed as she put them into the ground and covered the seeds. The neighbor watched her doing so for several minutes and then came over and introduced herself and asked Gina why she spit on the seeds before she planted the seeds. Gina held a straight face and said that something in the saliva gives the seeds a great boost to make them germinate so much quicker. She said some sometimes it only takes about a week for the seed to break the ground. In fact, Gina was doing, what Gina was doing was spitting on the seeds so that she could put only one very small seed in each spot and nothing to do with germination at all. She told Stephanie about what had happened and said that this lady had started spitting on every seed that she planted after hearing what the old English woman had told her. We laughed about that forever. Gina was happier in Louisiana than Arkansas because it was much warmer in the winter. Stephanie was not very happy, on the other hand, because she was the only white person at work on the night shift. She was resented by most of her staff because they liked the manager that had been fired that Stephanie had just replaced. Her staff was not following, her staff did not follow Stephanie as she tried to get them to do in a timely fashion. They got it done by the end of the shift, but always very slowly. Stephanie also did not like to go to work at 10 p.m. and get off at 6 a.m. I didn't like that either. But Stephanie said, we do what we have to do. The landlord asked me to tear down the large aluminum swimming pool, above ground swimming pool, in the backyard, and I agreed if I could sell the material when I got it down. They said that's fine with them. And I started the tear down and placed the aluminum parts on my flatbed trailer until I could haul it to the scrap buyers. The pool had an aluminum deck as well, and that increased the amount of aluminum I would be able to sell. It took me 2 weeks to complete the teardown before I could sell the scrap from the pool. I had it already loaded on the trailer when I was done. The nice thing about this teardown, I ended up with a coffee can full of 3/8 inch self tapping metal screws. When I sold the scrap, I was paid $512 for the aluminum. I was left with a very clean garden spot, too, in the backyard. After the teardown, I was feeling good and started to do other cleanups around the place when I injured my back and could hardly walk. I sat most of the 3 days following that, trying to heal with no luck. I was the same or worse off by doing nothing. I made an appointment with my doctor to have an examination. I was always up when Stephanie got home from work to welcome her and to see how her day went for her. It was one of only a few hours that we got to see each other each day. She went to bed about 7 a.m. I really hated the job she had because I was alone all day and slept by myself every night. The plant worked 6 days a week. On one of Stephanie's days off, we went to the Bonnie and Clyde Ambush Museum in Gibbsland, Louisiana. We had seen the car that they had been ambushed in in California and had watched the movie. The truth about Bonnie and Clyde is much worse than we had thought. They met in Texas in 1930. They started their spree in 1932, and by 1934, when they were ambushed in Bienville Parish, Louisiana, we just had to go to their museum while we were there. There was also a Bonnie and Clyde swap meet once a month in Arcadia, where I bought a Clancy graybeard tree, the prettiest tree I had ever seen anywhere. I had an appointment the next day at 11 o'clock in the morning, and I left about 10:30 a.m. And the doctor did an x-ray to see what was going on with my back. She also gave me a shot to relax my back muscles. It worked well, and I was able to walk by the time I got home. When I pulled up to the house, one of my Shar-Pei dogs, I had a pair, which had been free range since we'd been there, was on the front porch of a neighbor's house. I called it home and I put it on a long leash in the backyard. As I was getting ready to go into the house, I found an opened switchblade knife on the driveway as I was going into the garage. The dogs slept in the garage. I realized at that moment that the dogs had been awakened by someone going into my garage and maybe going to break into the house where Stephanie was sleeping. It gave me a very bad scare. I decided I would never leave her alone during the day again because of the danger I had put her into. I then knew that the dog on the neighbor's porch barking at their door was probably the man who was in my garage. I told Stephanie about it when she got up, and she told me about her finding a flat tire every other night on her car at work. The maintenance crew would air it up and it would not go flat again till she went to work. She said that is how she knew that someone was letting the air out of her tire. The last straw was when she reported it to the night boss, and nothing was ever done. And the next night, her tire was flat because it had been slashed, and she didn't go back to work there another day. She had been getting overt threats that she didn't talk about until after. When that happened, the maintenance crew changed her tire for her. They suggested she might not be safe there anymore. I know she agreed with that assessment, as I did too. When she got home from work that day, she told me everything. Coupled with what was possible at home, we decided she should quit this job and we would go back to Alabama, where we loved it. She was so relieved I could see it in her eyes and her body language. I had not noticed how on edge she had become until she was calmed down again. We talked about Oklahoma, going back home, but we had sold both of our houses there by this time. We decided we would go to our daughter's house and from there find a place for ourselves. We then had to break the news to Stephanie's mother. We knew she would not like to hear this news. We were right. She was very quiet while we spoke and didn't say anything right then. We knew she was not happy with the idea, but we didn't want to stay in Louisiana either. We think Gina was very happy there, but she could not stay there if we were gone. Gina had sold her car when she moved to her youngest daughter's house in Battle Creek, Michigan. Stephanie called our daughter and told her what had happened, and she suggested we stay with her until we could sort everything out. We were glad to hear that we and we agreed right away. Stephanie said that that night that night was the best night of rest she had had in months, and I believe her true. The next Sunday, when we went to church, her mother told us she had talked to a friend of hers in Escalon, California, about staying with her until she could get established there herself. Her friend welcomed her, and Gina had already ordered herself train ticket to Modesto, California. It was the closest stop to Escalon. She was to leave on the first of the month. We got ready for our move, and Gina got ready for hers too. The first came quite quickly, but Gina moved in with us for 3 days before the ticket was valid. We would not have to go get her, and she had already sold everything except her clothes. They were in suitcases. When the day of departure came, we carried Gina to a small town in Texas, about 100 miles west of where we lived. Then Gina was on her way safely. We started making ready for our move. We started by having Stephanie's car serviced in Ruston, the big town just east of where we lived. We were in the waiting room when the car was pulled into a stall, and I watched a serviceman open the radiator and water erupted out. He went about the service and I didn't really watch him anymore. We were ready in about 15 minutes and paid our bill and left, and we drove back to the house to get the rest of our belongings. When we had taken a day earlier to carry the hot tub and other things to Michelle's house in Prattville. Uh, it was about 7 hour drive from Bienville, Louisiana to Prattville, Alabama. We were on our way at 8 a.m. That day after the service of the car. We had traveled only 30 miles when Stephanie's car overheated and she signaled me with her headlights. We stopped on a outskirts of Ruston. The car had only been driven 15 miles that morning after the servicing. I believe that the serviceman did not refill the radiator after it had been opened and lost some of its coolant. We filled the radiator, but the damage had already been done. We drove to the next town and the car was hot again. I was driving the RV and pulling my trailer with the pickup on it. We took the pickup off the trailer and put the car on the trailer. Stephanie drove the pickup the rest of the way. The car was going to need some work done to keep driving it. We were glad to be away from Louisiana, and we were going into the unknown once more. In the next chapter I'm going to read is Prattville. It's when we got to our daughter's house, and we stayed there until we found a place to go. And it ended up being down near Dothan, Alabama. But we'll get on that the next story I present. I don't know what's the matter with this thing.